At my sister's baby shower, they laughed behind my back, saying I would never understand what a real family is. I left in silence. 2 weeks later, the eviction notice arrived, and they found out who was paying for everything. The silent inheritance. My name is Nathan, and I'm 28 years old. For most of my adult life, I was the shadow in my own family. Not because I lacked a voice or conviction, but because I learned early on that in my home, silence was a much safer refuge than any words. I grew up with my mother, my older sister, Lily, and my grandmother, all of us squeezed into the sturdy house my grandfather had left us. My father left when I was 8. While his departure affected me more than I ever showed, I adapted. Lily, on the other hand, embraced his absence like a banner, as if she had to become the perfect daughter in his place. My mother clung to her with the devotion of someone who had lost everything else. I, in contrast, was simply part of the furniture. I was there, discreet, reliable, and conveniently invisible. As I grew up, I followed the path I thought was right. I worked tirelessly, kept my head down, and made sure not to be a bother. College wasn't an option. There was no money, and no one encouraged me to apply for scholarships. Instead, I got part-time jobs right out of high school, shifts at a warehouse, the gas station, home deliveries. Always on the move, always working, never asking for anything in return. My family never offered to help, but they gladly accepted my money when bills piled up or when Lily wanted something she couldn't afford. And that happened often. Lily was the kind of person who floated through life, convinced the world owed her a parade. She changed her university major 3 times, then quit and took a break, while I worked double shifts to keep everything afloat. Every time she complained about the rent or car payments, my mother would guilt-trip me, reminding me of my duty as a brother. And I always complied, even when I had to sleep on a futon in the corner of the living room, so Lily could have her own room when she moved back home for a few months. Even when I worked with a fever because someone had to pay the water bill and Grandma's medicine that same week. I never complained, at least not out loud. But the silent resentment, the kind that accumulates drop by drop, is the worst kind. You start by believing you're simply doing the right thing. One day, you realize you've completely disappeared from your own life. You're just a paycheck and a spare pair of hands. When Lily got pregnant, the news brought the usual chaos of shouting and tears. But by the end of the week, my mother was already overflowing with joy at the idea of being a grandmother, and Lily was browsing Pinterest for baby room ideas. I didn't say much. I congratulated her, offered to help, and went back to work. I thought maybe this time things would change, that motherhood would make her more humble, more realistic. However, it only served to make the spotlight on her shine even brighter. The baby shower was held at the house. They spared no expense. Pink balloons, streamers, a flower wall, an entire table dedicated to cakes and sweets. I contributed discreetly to the food and decor costs. They didn't ask me, but I knew my mother couldn't cover everything, and I didn't want Lily to be stressed. I transferred the money, kept to the side, and assumed that was enough. On the day of the party, I arrived a bit late after an exhausting shift. I was tired. My clothes still smelled of oil and cardboard, but I had cleaned myself up as best I could. I brought a gift. Nothing flashy, just a good quality baby carrier that I knew would last. When I walked in, hardly anyone noticed me. Some nodded. My mother was showing the cake to one of Lily's friends, and she barely glanced at me before returning to her group of guests. I didn't expect a big welcome. I was used to being ignored. But what hurt wasn't the indifference, but the laughter. It started when I walked past a small group near the kitchen. One of Lily's friends whispered something and laughed under her breath. Another, loud enough for me to hear, said, "He's sweet, but like a rescued stray dog." I paused, but kept walking. Maybe I'd misheard. I wasn't there to cause trouble. Later, I heard my own mother talking to some older relatives. "Nathan? Oh, he just works a lot. He's always busy. He doesn't really understand family." Someone laughed and added, "Well, some people are better off alone. He's always been a bit distant, hasn't he?" I stood there, clutching my paper plate, feeling the frosting on my cake melt as my stomach churned. I hadn't said a word, hadn't done anything, and yet I was the odd one out, the joke in the house I had saved from collapse more times than they would ever know. When I handed my gift to Lily, she smiled politely and said, "Thanks, but I think I already have one." She passed it to a friend without even opening it. 10 minutes later, I heard her say she didn't expect anything fancy from me. And that was it. That was the moment. I didn't make a scene. I didn't throw the gift or shout. I simply threw my plate in the trash, gave my grandmother a nod of approval, the only one who smiled at me sincerely that day, and left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say anything at all. I didn't get a message that night or the next. No one asked if I was okay. No one noticed that the man who had been paying for bills, groceries, and the mortgage without being asked had completely disappeared from their lives. 2 weeks later, my mother called me in a panic. "Nathan," she said, her voice already strained, "we got something from the bank about the mortgage. It talks about overdue payments. What's going on?" I didn't answer immediately. I just looked at the screen and said slowly, "I think you should check whose name the utilities and mortgage are under and see up to when they've been paid." There was a silence, followed by more frantic questions. I hung up before answering any of them. That was the beginning of the end, and they were about to learn, in the most painful way, just how much they had taken me for granted. In the following days, my phone was saturated, but not with messages of concern or apologies, but with demands. At first, my mother sent me audios, confused and accusatory. "Why are we getting letters from the bank? This house has always been fine," she snapped an A. Voicemail. Then came the texts. "Did you cancel something? What's happening? Did you touch the accounts?" I ignored them. I wasn't ready to respond. The truth was, for the past 3 years, I had been silently paying the mortgage. When my grandmother's health worsened and her fixed income couldn't cover her medicine and the house, I stepped in. At first, it was just a few $100s here and there, but over time, I took on the full payment. I had set up an automatic plan in my name. The deed was still in my grandfather's name, with everything pending a probate process that no one had bothered to finish. They weren't interested in the responsibility, they just wanted to live there. I also paid for the utilities, especially after my mother fell behind when Lily moved back home and my grandmother required almost constant care. I had the keys and passwords to all the accounts. I had been taking care of everything anonymously, and they had grown used to that silence, confusing it with absence, with weakness. Now, with payments frozen, and without warning, reality was knocking at their door. But instead of acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, I had done more than they thought, they became defensive. My mother left another voicemail that almost made me laugh out loud. "I can't believe you would do this to your own family. We're going to be evicted. Why did you just stop without telling anyone?" The audacity to expect a courtesy warning before I withdrew the lifeline I had been throwing them. Then Lily joined in. She sent me a long paragraph that read more like a sermon than a message. "If you were having problems, you should have said something. This is supposed to be a happy time for me, and you're ruining it. I'm pregnant, Nathan. Do you even care what this stress is doing to me?" That last part stuck with me. "Do you even care?" I stared at those words, rereading them until the letters became blurry. The same girl who had never thanked me, who had called me, just the help, at a Christmas party 2 years ago when her boyfriend asked what I did. Now she was accusing me of not caring. And right then, any trace of guilt I felt for walking away vanished completely. Still, I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to take the next step. I focused on my job, on myself. For once, I let their chaos exist without me to clean it up, and the consequences became apparent. In a matter of days, the electricity bill was overdue. They cut off their Wi-Fi. The gas company left a final notice on the door. I knew because my grandmother called me, not to scold me, but sweetly. "Nathan, honey, I know you've been helping more than anyone knew. I'm sorry they never saw it. I just want you to know. I see you. I always have." Her words touched me more than all the others combined. I offered to pay for her medicine directly, but nothing else. I made sure her account was up to date and that the pharmacy had her prescriptions ready, but I let the house collapse under its own weight. A week later, they ambushed me at work. I was in the back room unloading inventory when a coworker tipped me off. "Hey, there's a lady up front asking for you. Says she's your mom." I sighed, wiped my hands on my pants, and went out. Sure enough, there she was, standing by the counter, arms crossed and eyes scanning every corner of the store as if she were above the place. When she saw me, she didn't even say hello. "We need to talk right now." I looked at my manager, who gave me an understanding look and gestured toward the break room. As soon as the door closed, she vented, "You need to fix this now. The bank says we're 3 months behind on payments. They're talking about foreclosure. Your sister cries every night. Your grandmother is confused, and this is all your fault. You can't just abandon your family like this." I didn't yell or even raise my voice. I just said calmly, I didn't abandon anyone. I simply stopped carrying a weight that none of you cared about until it disappeared. She blinked, taken by surprise. "I paid the mortgage. I paid the water, the gas, the internet. I paid the property taxes when you forgot. I paid for Grandma's insulin. I covered Lily's rent when she moved back and stopped working for 6 months. I've been taking care of everything, Mom. In silence, without a single thank you, without anyone offering to help. And the one time I stop, suddenly I'm the villain. Her face twisted as if she'd been slapped. That's not fair, she snapped. You never said no before. Exactly. That was the problem. Everyone built their comfort on the assumption that I would always be there, I said. Even when you ignored me, made fun of me, forgot my birthday 3 years in a row, laughed behind my back at the baby shower. Do you know how humiliating it was to hear my own mother say I don't understand family when I'm the only one keeping it on its feet? She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I wasn't asking for applause, I continued, but I won't let you shame me for deciding to walk away. She tried a new tactic. Tears. You're tearing this family apart, Nathan. I looked her straight in the eyes. This family was broken long before I stopped paying the bills. You just didn't notice until the lights went out. I walked out of the break room before she could respond. The consequences of that conversation spread like wildfire. Lily posted some vague phrase online about being betrayed by those closest to her and how not everyone deserves a seat at the table. Her friends filled the comments with pity and messages like "Stay strong, Queen," without knowing she was crying in a house she hadn't paid a single cent for. My mother tried to blame Grandma, but Grandma had already made a decision. She told me over the phone, "They don't deserve to keep depending on you, honey. Let them learn." And learn they would, because just when they thought it couldn't get any worse, when the eviction notice arrived in an official red envelope, I made a call that would completely change the situation. I didn't make that call out of spite, at least not at first. I called because I needed clarity. 4 years, I had taken on the responsibilities of that house without complaining. But now that the illusion was broken, I wanted to know exactly where I stood. So I contacted the probate lawyer who had tried to handle my grandfather's inheritance before everything was filed away. The lawyer remembered me. "Ah, Nathan, you were the one who asked about the back taxes a few years ago, weren't you?" "Yes," I replied. "And I'm the one who paid them." There was a pause on the other end. "That's interesting, because according to the records, you were the only one who followed up." I explained the situation, how the house was still in limbo, how no one had finalized the inheritance, and how I had been paying for everything without being on any legal documents, except for the utility accounts. "Well," he said after a moment, "the will your grandfather left, it named you as the main heir, not your mother, not your sister. You." I froze. "What?" "It's all in the paperwork. The house, the land, everything. It was supposed to be yours, but the inheritance was never officially closed. It just needs a visit to the courthouse and some paperwork. If you want to finalize it now, I can have the documents ready by the end of the week." I sat in silence, with the phone to my ear, as the world around me faded away. All those years, all the bills, the sleepless nights, the exhaustion, and the house had been mine the whole time. "They never told me," I murmured. "My mother, Lily." No one said anything. "I'm not surprised," he replied gently. "It's not uncommon, especially when family dynamics get complicated." That night, I barely slept, not because I was undecided, but because something finally clicked in my mind. The years of contempt, the silent jokes at my expense, the way they never included me in decisions about the house, they knew. Or at least my mother did. She must have seen the will. She must have known I was the one my grandfather trusted with the house. And instead of telling me, instead of honoring his wishes, she simply let me pay again and again while treating me like a second-class guest in my own home. It was a cold, calculated betrayal, and much deeper than I had ever imagined. The next morning, I went to the county registrar's office. I filed the documents, signed the necessary forms, and scheduled the court date. It was a discreet, simple, unceremonious process. But when the judge struck the gavel and declared the transfer complete, I walked out with legal ownership of the house. That house, the one I grew up in, the one I had fought to keep standing, was finally mine. 2 days later, I drove there. I didn't send messages or give a heads up. When I got to the driveway, I saw Lily's car, still with the dent on the side it had had for months. My mother's car was parked crookedly, half on the lawn. The porch light was off despite it being mid-afternoon, and a stack of unopened mail clung to the mailbox with a rubber band. I could feel the tension in the air even before I got out of the car. The door was open. Inside, the living room was a mess. Baby stuff everywhere, crumpled receipts on the table, a half-finished bowl of cereal next to the sofa. Lily was sitting in a recliner, scowling at her phone. She looked at me and rolled her eyes. "Oh, it's you." I ignored her and walked past, heading to the kitchen, where my mother was at the sink, washing something with dry, angry movements. She didn't turn around when she heard me. "If you've come to give us another lecture, don't bother. We're already drowning." "Thanks to you." I placed a manila envelope on the counter. "What is this?" she asked, drying her hands and opening it. She skimmed the first page, then the second, and her face paled. This can't be real, she whispered. It's the court order, I said calmly. The house is legally mine now. Grandpa left it to me. The will was never closed, but I just took care of that. My mother's lips parted, but she didn't make a sound. You knew, didn't you? I asked, my voice low and firm. You saw the will. You knew it wasn't yours. But you let me pay for everything anyway. You lied by omission. And now you're standing in a house that doesn't belong to you. Lily came in like a whirlwind, her voice shrill and rising in pitch. Are you evicting a pregnant woman? Seriously? What kind of brother does that? I turned slowly to her. The kind of brother who was treated like a wallet for 6 years while being told he wasn't really part of the family. She laughed bitterly. So this is revenge. You think this makes you some kind of hero? No, I said, taking a step forward. This makes me the owner, and I have to make decisions. The atmosphere became heavy. My mother sat down heavily in a chair, holding the paperwork with trembling hands. Lily kept ranting, saying things like, I'll go to court, and you have no heart. But none of it mattered anymore. I looked at both of them and, for the first time, I saw it clearly. Not just the betrayal, but the pattern. I had always been the safety net, the invisible support, the shadow they could lean on and walk all over at the same time. But I wasn't that person anymore. I left the papers on the counter. You have until the end of the week. And then I walked out, the door closing behind me with a sense of finality that echoed through the house. But what came next? That's when things really fell apart. After leaving the house, I parked 2 blocks away and stayed in the car. No music, no calls, just me with my thoughts tangled in the silence. I should have felt victorious, vindicated. I had done the right thing. I protected what my grandfather left me. I stood up for myself and finally confronted the people who had taken advantage of me for years. Instead, I felt an emptiness. The weight of what I had done hit me harder than I expected. Not the ownership part, not even the eviction notice. It was the silence. The certainty that my family had never been a real family to me. For them, family meant access, comfort, someone to fix things when they broke. That night, in my 1-bedroom apartment, the modest place where I had lived for 4 years while paying the mortgage on the family house where I was unwelcome, I looked at the walls. The second-hand sofa, the small table, a few framed photos of Grandpa and me on a fishing trip. No one had ever visited, not once. I sat on the edge of the bed and checked my messages. Nothing from my mother, nothing from Lily. Not even a fake apology. Just silence. And for a brief second, I wondered if I had gone too far, if I had let resentment get the better of me. Then I opened my finance app and checked the transactions from the last few months. Almost 70% of my paycheck had gone to keeping them afloat. 70%. It wasn't resentment. I was just tired of bleeding for people who hadn't even noticed my pain. Still, that feeling of emptiness persisted. The next morning, I got a call from the assisted living facility. I had been researching for my grandmother. Hello, Nathan. A vacancy has opened up for the end of the month. If you're still interested, we'd love to meet with your grandmother and discuss the details. I made the appointment immediately. If I was going to free myself from that house, I had to first make sure Grandma was safe. She was the only one who had never mocked me, the only one who had never asked for anything. She always offered me the little she had, even if it was just a warm smile or a cup of tea when she saw I was tired. But even that didn't go well. When I called her to tell her about the vacancy and asked if she wanted to visit the place, her voice sounded nervous. Soft. I'd love to, honey, but your mother has been acting strange lately. Since you left the papers, she barely speaks to me, and she hides the mail when it comes. She paused. I don't think she wants me to go anywhere. I felt my jaw clench. She's doing what? I'm fine, Grandma hurried to say, as if to soften the blow. But you can tell she's angry. And Lily hasn't spoken to me since you came. I think they blame me for something. Of course they did. I hadn't even considered that they would try to isolate her to punish me. But it made sense. Grandma had always been the closest to me, and now that I had the power, they needed a scapegoat inside the house. That night, I sat down with a notepad and started writing everything down objectively. What needed to happen next? Who needed to be notified? What resources did I need to align? I called the facility again and asked about their transportation service. I even sent an email to the lawyer to ask about securing the property and what my rights as the owner were if the residents refused to leave. I didn't want to throw them out on the street, but I couldn't leave my grandmother in that toxic environment. And I couldn't keep investing time and energy in people who saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM. And yet, as I planned the next steps, the emotional toll overwhelmed me. At work, I'd zone out during meetings. One afternoon, I dropped a box of products in the warehouse and just stood there, staring at the broken glass, until a coworker pulled me out of my trance. My appetite was gone. I'd sit with food in front of me for 20 minutes and barely touch it. It wasn't the money, not even the betrayal. It was grief. The grief of realizing that my family had never really seen me, that for them, love had conditions, respect had requirements, and loyalty was taken for granted, not earned. I didn't cry, not really. But one night, tidying a drawer, I found an old Polaroid photo from when I was 10. It was Lily and me on the front porch. She was holding an ice cream cone and smiling. I had my arm around her like the proud older brother, even though she was 2 years older. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb tracing the edges. How did we go from that to this? The next morning, I woke up early and went back to the house. Not to fight, not to lecture, just to observe. I parked on the other side of the street and watched for a while. It was quiet. Too quiet. The curtains were closed. There was no movement. After about 20 minutes, I saw my mother come out with a trash bag. She looked thinner, more disheveled. She threw the bag in the bin and went back inside without noticing me. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to keep orbiting them in the hope they would finally treat me with decency. I wasn't going to wait for gratitude that would never come. I was going to secure my grandmother's future. I was going to finalize the property transfer. And after that, I was going to sell it. But before I could take the definitive steps, something unexpected happened. Something that changed everything and led the situation to dangerous ground. Things started to change the moment I committed to walking away. It didn't happen all at once, but with slow, deliberate steps after years of being stuck. The first of them came that weekend. I took my grandmother to visit the assisted living facility. I picked her up myself, making sure to call ahead so my mother couldn't interfere. When I arrived at the house, Grandma was already waiting for me on the sidewalk in her sweater and walking shoes, with her small travel bag by her side. She gave me a tired smile, her eyes a little teary. "Ready?" I asked, offering her my arm. "More than you know," she whispered. I helped her into the car, and we drove in silence for a while. The tension didn't leave her shoulders until we were out of the neighborhood. Only then did she relax, as if she had been holding her breath for weeks. She told me things inside the house had become colder, that my mother and Lily barely spoke to her unless they needed something. That they tiptoed around her, not out of care, but as if she were a burden they didn't know how to get rid of. I felt a knot of rage in my chest, but I didn't let it show. The facility, in contrast, was warm, bright, and pleasant. They had a community garden, a reading room, even a weekly shuttle to town for shopping. When we visited her potential apartment, a cozy corner unit with a small balcony and a view of the trees, she ran her fingers over the windowsill and said almost to herself, "He would have loved this." She met my grandfather. We stayed for lunch and met some of the staff. At the end of the visit, Grandma turned to me and said, "If you can make this work, I'll be happy here." That was all I needed. I paid the deposit from my savings that same day. It was the most expensive decision I had made all year, but also the most rewarding. I gave the staff her medical history, her dietary needs, her prescriptions, and an emergency contact number, mine. And for the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt like I was doing something for myself, something that was right. The next step was the house. I met with a real estate agent the following Monday. She was efficient, smart, and didn't bat an eye when I told her the property was still occupied. "Not for long," I added. She walked with me through the property, took notes, and said, "It has good bones. It needs some work, of course, but the location is worth good money. You should get them out of there soon. You can't sell with a circus inside." I nodded. "I'm on it." Legally, I couldn't force an immediate eviction unless they caused damage or refused to leave after the official notice. So I filed the paperwork, with a 30-day deadline to vacate, and made sure it was hand-delivered with a witness. No loopholes, no excuses. At work, things also improved. I had been silently grinding for years. The guy who always took the night shifts, the holidays, who doubled up when someone was out. I never asked for recognition. But after my store manager saw how I handled the property situation, calmly, methodically, without getting sentimental even when they ambushed me, he called me into his office. "Have you ever thought about moving up?" he asked. "We're opening a new branch on the other side of town next quarter. You've got leadership potential. People respect you. You don't cause problems." That last part made me smile. "I'm interested," I said simply. He nodded. "I'll put you on the list for assistant manager. It's a raise and more hours, but you'd be in charge of your own team. Think about it." I didn't have to think about it. I accepted the offer 2 days later. With the promotion came a better salary, It wasn't life-changing, but it was enough to feel like I could finally breathe easy. I fixed up my apartment, added a desk for the first time, and replaced my old mattress with one that didn't feel like a punishment. I even joined a gym and started going 3 times a week to move and clear my head. Every small change felt like a gesture of defiance to the version of me who used to come home exhausted and broke after paying other people's bills. And as for Lily and my mother, well, they noticed. My mother now left me voicemails that masqueraded as apologies. "I didn't realize how much you were doing," she'd say. Or, "I never meant to make you feel left out." But it always came back to the same thing. "Can we talk? Can you reconsider? Can we come to an agreement?" Lily tried a different tactic. She showed up at my job one day, pregnant, her belly already showing, and her arms crossed over her chest like a shield. "I know we've had problems," she said, standing next to the cash registers. "But you don't have to ruin us. That house is the only thing we have, and you don't even need it. You live in a small apartment and work in a store. Why are you taking this from us?" I looked her in the eyes. "Because it's mine. Grandpa left it to me. And instead of honoring that, you used me until I was no longer useful." Her face twisted in disbelief, as if she couldn't understand that I was saying that out loud, that I was no longer the silent mule. I walked away and let my coworkers escort her out. A week later, I moved my grandmother to her new home. She cried when we took her inside, not from sadness but from relief. The staff welcomed her like family. Her room was full of light. I filled her fridge with her favorite yogurts and left a small framed photo of her and Grandpa on the dresser. That night, I slept better than I had in months. And then came the final letter, a certified copy of the eviction notice, sealed and delivered. 30 days. That was the legal grace period. But I knew they wouldn't leave peacefully, especially since I had just discovered something new, something about the house's value that changed everything. And as soon as I confirmed it, I knew exactly how I would deliver the final blow. About 2 weeks after Grandma settled into her new home, I got a call from my real estate agent. I had just finished closing the store for the night and was walking to my car when I saw her name on the screen. "Hello, Nathan," she said, a little breathless. "You're going to want to sit down. Has the roof caved in?" She laughed. "No, better. Remember how I told you the location was good? Well, I just spoke with the developer. Apparently, the city council approved plans to rezone that entire block. They're going to turn it into a mixed-use development zone. Businesses on the bottom, apartments above. Your house is right on one of the planned access roads. Property value in that area is estimated to be about to double, even triple." I stopped walking, my hand gripping my keys tightly. "Are you serious?" "Totally. And get this. That same developer might be interested in buying now, before the rezoning raises taxes. You'd be in a perfect position to negotiate, but first, you have to get them out of there." My heart was pounding. 4 years, that house had been a weight on my neck. A place filled with tension, bitterness, and thankless responsibilities. But now it was an opportunity. Not just emotional, but financial. It was power. I could sell the house for a life-changing amount, pay off my debts, put a down payment on a better apartment, maybe even buy my own place, start something new on my own terms. Or I could lease it to the developer, take the profits, benefit from the project, options I had never had, all stemming from the one place, where I was never seen as anything more than a spare wallet. I called the lawyer again the next day and asked how to expedite the eviction. "If they leave the house in bad shape, or if they refuse to comply with the notice, you can request an expedited order," he explained. "But it's simpler if they leave voluntarily." I nodded, even though I already knew they wouldn't leave voluntarily. Still, I had to try one more time. If not for them, for Grandma's peace of mind. So I wrote a letter. Not a cold, legal one, but a real one. 3 paragraphs, written in a direct way. "Mom, Lily, as you already know, the house no longer belongs to you. I have complied with every legal step. I have paid every overdue bill. I have maintained this home and its inhabitants long after I stopped being welcome in it. But this ends now. You have 2 options. You leave quietly in the next 10 days, and I will give each of you a small subsidy for moving. No conditions, just enough to get you on your feet. Or you stay beyond the deadline, and I will request a forced removal through the court. You will leave with nothing and with a record. You don't have to like me, but you will respect what I have done and what I am capable of. Nathan." I sent it by certified mail, with tracking, and I waited. During that wait, my life started to accelerate, almost as if the universe was finally making a place for me. I received confirmation that my promotion to assistant manager came with a transfer to the new store, closer to my apartment, with better hours and a better team. I accepted without hesitation. I enrolled in 2 online courses, one on real estate fundamentals and another on small business finance. For the first time in years, I had mental energy again. I wasn't just surviving, I was building. Even socially, things changed. A coworker, Sarah, started talking to me more during shifts. One day, she noticed I brought my own food and said, "You cook? That's kind of weird." We laughed. She joked about how she burned instant noodles. Then we had lunch together the next day and the day after. It wasn't serious yet, but it was something. Then, 10 days after I sent the letter, the storm arrived. I came home from work and found my apartment door covered in sticky notes. Angry, childish messages. "You're a jerk. So awful. You betrayed your family. Hope the money keeps you warm." I peeled them off one by one, with a strange calm. I recognized Lily's handwriting. Some were from my mother. She had that dramatic handwriting that always curved the Y in my name as if signing a yearbook. They weren't subtle, but they gave me a gift because, tucked among those notes, possibly by accident, was a folded receipt from a pawn shop. I opened it, and my stomach churned. The list showed a sale from 2 days earlier. Jewelry, rings, earrings, a pearl necklace, all in Lily's name. The items matched my grandmother's jewelry. I had seen them in a glass box on her dresser just a week earlier when I helped her unpack at the facility. I called Grandma immediately. "Do you still have your jewelry box?" I asked gently. Silence. Then, "Oh, I didn't even remember to look. I just assumed they had packed it." She paused. "Wait, no. It wasn't with the rest of my things." "Nathan, you don't think they—" "I'm afraid so." That was the last straw. This wasn't just arrogance, not just manipulation. It was theft from a woman who had shown nothing but kindness. And it was from her own daughter and granddaughter. They had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. And suddenly, I didn't just have a legal advantage, but a criminal one. I contacted the pawn shop, confirmed the transaction, and took down the employee's name. Then, I filed a police report, not because I wanted them arrested, but because I wanted it documented, recorded, something I could slide across a judge's desk if it came to that. By the end of that week, I had 3 powerful things: legal ownership of the house, an impending buyer offering a price far above market value, and evidence of criminal conduct by the current occupants. And that's when I took the final step. I scheduled a meeting. Neutral ground, a quiet corner in a coffee shop across town. I sent a message to my mother and Lily with the time and place. I didn't tell them what it was about. They arrived late. Lily looked angry. My mother looked exhausted. Before they could speak, I slid a folder across the table. Inside were 3 things: a copy of the police report, the offer letter from the developer, and a printed screenshot of the eviction deadline. My mother paled. Lily scoffed. "This is pathetic." "No," I said. "This is real. You have 72 hours left. I can press charges, or you can leave with a check. One time only, no second chances." They looked at me as if they didn't recognize who I was. And, to be honest, they didn't, because the Nathan they remembered, the silent, submissive, invisible one, no longer existed. Now I had power, and I was about to use it. They didn't take the deal. Of course they didn't. After all the warnings, the notices, the letter, the report, they still thought they could win. Lily rolled her eyes and pushed the folder back across the coffee shop table. "We're not signing anything," she said, her voice loud enough for the couple in the corner to turn around. "Do you think just because you got lucky with a zoning loophole in a dead man's will, you're the king of the world now?" My mother was quieter, but her tone was even colder. "Would you really do this to your own family? Sell your sister's house? Evict your mother after everything we've done for you?" I didn't flinch. I simply closed the folder and tucked it under my arm. "All right," I said, standing up. "I'll see you in court." I walked away without looking back. The next morning, I went to the courthouse with all the documents I had prepared. The will, the deed transfer, the payment records, the photos of a pawn shop receipt, a copy of the eviction notice, the filed police report. When I finished presenting everything to the clerk and the judge, I was granted the expedited removal. An officer would be assigned to deliver the final 48-hour notice. If they didn't leave, they would be forcibly evicted. But I didn't stop there. The pawn shop incident had opened another door, and I planned to walk through it. With Grandma's permission, I contacted the shop owner directly. I explained the situation, provided the police report, and asked him to hold the items until we sorted out the theft. He hesitated, but after speaking with the detective assigned to the case, he agreed. Then, I asked a lawyer, a friend of a coworker, to draft a civil lawsuit. Theft of property, emotional distress, damages for fraud and deceit. I wasn't aiming to ruin them financially, but it sent a message. You took something sacred, and you're not getting out of here without any consequences. Meanwhile, at the house, things were falling apart at a rapid pace. Lily posted a long, dramatic rant on Facebook about toxic brothers and jealous men who think money makes them better than blood. She painted herself as a victim, pregnant, scared, abandoned. Comments from people who didn't know the full story were quick to arrive. Stay strong, girl. You're doing great, honey. Block him. You don't need that negativity. But then something changed. A comment stood out. Wait, isn't that your grandma's house? The one your brother has been paying for? Someone else chimed in. I thought your mom said he was the one paying the mortgage. Then another. Didn't you pawn your grandma's necklace? I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The information spread, first quietly and then firmly. The people who mattered, family, friends, church acquaintances, even her high school best friend, began to distance themselves. There was no more sympathy, just silence. And then the day of the eviction arrived. I didn't go in person. I sent my lawyer. They resisted, of course. They refused to open the door. But the officers were patient. By the 4th hour, Lily was crying on the porch, her arms wrapped around a laundry basket. My mother was beside her, looking frilier than ever, hugging a cardboard box full of mismatched mugs and a half-burned candle. They were allowed to take what belonged to them, which, as it turned out, wasn't much. I had already secured Grandma's belongings. Everything else, furniture I had bought, appliances I had replaced, rugs, bookshelves, and curtains I had installed with my own hands, stayed in the house. They left it nearly empty, and I didn't let them back in. 2 days later, I walked through the house alone. It smelled of old perfume and stress, but calm peace reigned. It was mine. I opened the windows, let the light in, and turned on all the lamps. Then I called the developer. Let's talk numbers. The offer had gone up since the news of the rezoning broke. What had started as a substantial offer had turned into a bidding war. By the end of the week, I had a signed agreement, a closing date, and a check that exceeded everything I had earned in the last 5 years combined. I stood in the driveway on the final day, keys in hand, watching the sun set behind the house I once feared entering. A car drove by slowly, not theirs, just a stranger. But for a second, I wished it was them. That they could see what I had become. That the boy who sat in the corner, forgotten, and useful only when it was convenient, was now the one with the deed, the pen, the power. Instead, I looked at the keys one last time and left them in the real estate agent's hand. It was done. But I wasn't finished yet. Because what happened after the sale? Well, that's when everything truly came together. The outcome wasn't explosive. It was slow, silent. The kind of breakdown that happens behind closed doors, where bitterness festers and regret has no one to blame but itself. A week after the house sale closed, I got a message from an unknown number. No name, just, hope you're proud. We're in a motel. Lily's due in 3 weeks. Mom cries every night. I stared at it for a long time. There were no apologies, no accountability, just a passive-aggressive guilt trip wrapped in pity. The old Nathan might have replied, might have offered help, or at least an explanation, but I simply deleted the message and blocked the number. Meanwhile, Grandma was thriving. Her new apartment had become her sanctuary. She joined a book club, made friends with a woman named Edith who taught her to play bridge, and walked more now than in years. Every Sunday, we had lunch together on the patio. We talked about small things. Her garden, my new job, the movies that were playing. But the peace in her eyes said more than any words. I brought her the pearl necklace the pawn shop had returned to me. When I opened the small velvet box, she gasped and put a hand to her mouth. They didn't get away with it, I said softly. With any of it. She hugged me then, tighter than I expected. He would be proud of you, she whispered. Your grandfather. Very proud. And I believed her. News of the house sale spread through the family. Some cousins reached out, most with caution and politeness. They wanted to reconnect. An uncle emailed asking if I had any investment advice, as I seemed to be doing well lately. I ignored them. I didn't need a crowd, just clarity and perhaps peace. As for my mother and Lily, the consequences came faster than they expected. When Lily finally gave birth, it was in a crowded public hospital. No gifts, no flowers, just her and my mother and the cold reality that burned bridges aren't rebuilt overnight. They tried to move in with a distant cousin, but news of the police report, the pawn shop, of how I had supported them for years without getting credit had spread. No one wanted to get involved in that mess. They moved between cheap motels and borrowed couches, always one step away from the street. In the end, I heard from Grandma that they had left town. No forwarding address, No goodbyes, they were just gone. And I didn't look for them. Instead, I used some of the money from the house to start something I had silently dreamed of for years. My own logistics consulting business. Nothing flashy, just me. My laptop, a small office space, and a growing list of clients who respected my time and my knowledge. In 6 months, I was earning more than I ever had in retail. Within a year, I hired my first employee. I upgraded my apartment. I traveled for the first time in my adult life. I took Grandma to the beach, her first vacation since Grandpa died. Life went on. It wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was correction, realignment, the reclamation of everything I had been told I had no right to have. Respect, peace, freedom. And as I stood outside my office one morning, coffee cup in hand, watching the sunrise over the city where I once felt so small, I remembered the baby's shower, the laughter, the whispers, the way they all said I would never understand what a true family means. And now I do. A true family doesn't come with conditions. A true family doesn't use you and then shame you when you stop giving. A true family is one you protect, even when they never protected you. That was my last lesson, and I learned it the hardest way.